himself, the man that Dennis Allen said was the prophet of Saints beat reporting. What's up, my brother?
Now I know you're lying. So what's happening, man?
I do got to ask you this off the gate. I saw that you were a part, and a lot of the media members were a part of Sean Payton going out having some fun. But I mean, what was that like? I mean, what was the night like? And I mean, what was Sean Payton? I mean, hell, that had to be one of the greatest nights of all time.
I think so. Yeah, just to see unfiltered Sean, and it's kind of like if you ever seen the Comedy Central roasts, that was kind of like somewhat the moment. But then you had Sean telling some of these stories, and it's just like, holy crap! It just paints it in a different light. And so, amazing restaurant, and of course he was gracious enough to foot the bill, have a little entertainment as far as the bar scene goes and stuff. And it was interesting setting because some people made themselves look kind of interesting, and others were kind of low key and stuff. So I'll just leave it at that. But man, Sean was great. It was just good to see him and just kind of talk through some things, hear some things, and just see that side of him. Because all we see as the media is really it's Sean Payton. I'm plugged in. He's been plugged in for 22 plus years, or 20 plus years as a coach. So really cool scene. And he stayed for a long time. I mean, we're there probably almost 5 hours plus,
Oh,
so
wow.
I mean, it was a long affair. It was really cool to see him send it off. And I will just tell you, anybody that has hope that he's coming back, he ain't coming back to New Orleans. That's the send off he did. There's no way he comes back to New Orleans. So
interesting. Did he what was the funniest story that he had that you can share? I know there's probably some you can't share. Is there something that you can share that Sean? Because look, John, when you tell stories like that and you do it in a send-off, you're telling these stories for a lot of different reasons. But was there something funny that he said that you just will always remember?
I think it's two of them. And I'll say this one, the fact that he talked about his mood after the Super Bowl. And so if you ever pull up his Super Bowl picture and just see him, he's wearing like this wrinkled blue shirt in the picture. If you ever go back and look. So he's telling the story behind it about how basically he didn't get any sleep. He was going to, he'd asked about if we skip out on this particular press conference or whatever, it was like $100,000 fine and stuff. And so somehow he pulled himself together, but he was talking about doing that type of stuff and just kind of the scene from there, just how hard it was. And, we took for granted that, man, this man is just falling asleep with a trophy. I'm pretty sure he was still drunk from the way it sounded. So, and that kind of exhaustion. But, I think that was one. And then the other one was when they went to London, he was talking about Jeremy Shockey. And he was talking about that, Jeremy was kind of feeling a little bit, not as much energy as Jeremy Shockey would have. And at the time, obviously, Drew Brees was high into Avocare and stuff. And so he gave him some of his drinks, and he drank 3 of them. So Shockey drank 3 of those. And so he says they ran a tight end screen, right? And one of the first things, and Shockey comes to the sideline and says, man, don't call that stuff ever again. Just kind of that thing. And he just kind of took everybody on the sideline by surprise. And Sean said he went to Drew, he said, don't ever do that again. In the nicest version I can explain that story, but it was really hilarious. And I think those are 2 that I think Sean told. It was just like, man, that's just hilarious. I'll never forget those for the rest of my life.
Well, it's interesting to send off and what Sean meant to this state, even though he still has me blocked on Twitter, even though my camp and his camp have tried to mend fences. Hopefully we're unblocked and we're working on that. But it's very interesting. So, but there's a new era, a new age. Dennis Allen is here. You called it last time that you just couldn't see that there was a scenario that Dennis Allen wouldn't be the head coach. But one thing we did talk about, John, that I was really nervous about is the Saints not allowing him to bring in some of his own people. Well, they are. And Blaine Smith asked this question, #AskJohn, who will the Saints offensive coordinator be? Let's start there on the offensive side of the ball first. What are you hearing? What are you thinking? The one thing, and maybe you could shed some light on this, a lot of people saying, well, Eric Bieniemy was here for 8 hours. His contract's up. I mean, John, that meme. It's kind of like, what's going on there, but what are you hearing? What do you think the Saints do offensively?
Well, this is what I would tell you that Eric Bieniemy, I mean, he's obviously been passed over for head coaching job for plenty of years, right? And so if he wants to make a lateral move and revamp one of the league's worst offenses last year, I don't know what more you could do if you can come in and do that. I think New Orleans is an attractive destination. The biggest thing is, are you going to make a lateral move just to take more money? I mean, that's a possibility. I think obviously you see some of the interest that, look, Allen's going to be able to pick his staff, right? And he's mainly doing all that attention on the offensive side of the ball. I think somebody like Joe Brady could make sense, right? I'm just saying that that's just a direction that they could choose to go. I think you look at some of the other, it's going to be a candidate that if everything I've heard, I don't think it's going to be a set the world on fire candidate. Like, you're not going to look at this guy really and say like, well, that's a guy I thought about. And, case in point, they're interviewing one of the Cowboys guys today. And so, again, there's going to be some interest there. And again, I think the biggest thing is this offense needs a fresh perspective, right? And I think
I agree
you
with
see
that.
that's why they're moving around, going back to Doug Marrone as an offensive coordinator or offensive line coach. John Morton's name has been tossed around out there as a potential offensive coordinator. That's yet to be determined. So I know a lot of people have seen that. That's not even happened yet. So again, that's one of those that they have paired to Dennis Allen, but that's not a thing that's happened just yet. So they're obviously going to have a new wide receivers coach, because Curtis Johnson is going to be out. Joel Thomas is going to still be around. Pete Carmichael is going to be around. They're just going to have different roles. The only thing really other definitive move that we know is Zach Strief is going to be an assistant to Doug Marrone. So I think that's a good one because Strief, man, he's as smart as they come. And I was laughing because at the Senior Bowl, Ed Ogeron actually popped up at the Senior Bowl last week. He was just going there incognito. It's like, Ed, what are you doing here? You got like $17 million to stay at home and do absolutely nothing. But, he was making his rounds and he was talking to the Saints coaches there and talking to Strief for a good bit. And, it's just kind of everybody, like I said it. And people are like, Ed O's coming. He's going to do this. And I'm like, no, slow down. That man doesn't have to do anything, right? So I say all to say they got to find the right talent there, and who they get as the offensive coordinator is going to be really important because I think it goes hand in hand with the most important thing they have to address, which is the quarterback situation.
My next question, does the offensive coordinator help Dennis Allen on where they go there? I mean, look, today just because we're so deep into college, we're hearing some things about Matt Corral and the interest level there. And look, let's let that be, and we'll talk about the draft at a later time. But how much will Dennis? I don't know how to ask this, John, other than just coming out with it. It seemed like Sean had the stranglehold on the offense, and the defense could kind of do what they wanted to, and Dennis Allen could do what they wanted to. I mean, it feels like a complete flip now. Do you think that the autonomy of having an offense and maybe even choosing a guy that you want at quarterback and that can work with, is that just not a big selling point? And do you think that they keep Jameis around and let him talk about an offense coordinator he might want?
Yeah, I'd be surprised. This is what I would tell you. Everything that I've learned and understand, you're not going to have them draft a quarterback. And the reason why is this. They believe they have a roster that is there that can compete, right? And the thing is, the division's there for the taking. Tom Brady's out. You don't know what's happening with the Falcons. You don't know what happened with the Panthers. Shoot, Tampa might blow this thing up, right? And so the thing is, when it push comes to shove, they want to find a quarterback that has the experience and preferable deep experience, right? Leading the team deep in the playoffs. And I think they're going to be aggressive there, right? And so nobody that's on the roster, I'd tell you, is going to be that answer, right? It's not Taysom Hill. He's having to deal with a Liz Frank injury. It's not Ian Book, obviously, for obvious reasons. And Blake Bortles is the only other quarterback. He's a reserve future guy. Maybe this year's Trevor Siemian, but, the only other option, Winston, is technically, I'd say, an external because he is a free agent. But, from my understanding, I don't believe that's going to be a reunion. I like Jameis. I really did. But I think they want to find a step up from Jameis, if you will, somebody that has been proven. And then really, somebody's going to work well with Mike Thomas. Not that Jameis couldn't, right? But, that's not going to be the stop, end all, be all, is just bringing a good quarterback to work with just Michael Thomas. You've got to get a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. You've got to get some people there to challenge Callaway and Deontay Hardy. And look, I'm all for whatever that looks like. That's, signing free agents, couple of them, and then drafting somebody. I think that's definitely the way you should go, just because it's got to be that type of attention to detail, because the offense was just piss poor last week. I mean, for lack of better, or last year, for better phrase. And So again, you got to get this right, and they're talking about this being most important. So if they want to dangle the carrot, and you just look across, the NFC is really weak when it comes to quarterbacks. You look at the
Very
AFC, you got Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes, you've got Mac Jones that's rising, you've
Joe,
got Lamar
Joe
Jackson,
Burrow.
Joe Burrow. I mean, Josh Allen. I mean, you could keep going. I mean, you
Right.
might even throw guys like Tannehill and Derek Carr. But you look at the NFC, it looks like you just says, what is going on? And so there's a huge opportunity there for a good quarterback. And again, if they could pull off a trade, I'm not saying they will, but look, if you ask me, are you going to trade this year's first rounder or next year's first rounder for a premier talent? I do that in a heartbeat, because look at the last two: Peyton Turner,
Right.
Cesar Ruiz. They're not that good. They haven't been that good at drafting a first rounder. So I'm okay with getting those away, and they can fit these guys under the cap. Quarterback wise, you swing for the fences. I don't know if you can get Russ away from Seattle just because Sean's not there anymore and Pete Carroll's staying. So I don't think that's realistic. Rodgers is the one that I would keep an eye on potentially, but maybe they have to settle for a different quarterback. I'm not a huge Jimmy Garoppolo fan. Derek Carr, my biggest thing is, if you're getting praised over in Vegas, why are you leaving in the first place, right? And so that's
Right.
my other question there. But look, I would expect them to be active. Maybe it's a Deshaun Watson if they can flip him. The Texans. I don't know, with Lovie Smith coming in, that's interesting one too. So I would tell you that quarterback's most important there. Obviously, finding a good offensive coordinator will go a long way, and that's what they're going to have first before they say, here's the quarterback we're trying to target or go after.
And John, I do want to get to defense, maybe even in another episode, because I mean, look, you're not going to change a lot with Dennis Allen and just focusing so much on the offense because it was so bad in the transition. A lot of people are wanting me to ask you about Kamara, and I'm going to get to that in just a minute. I didn't want to start off with, "Hey, it's Alvin. What's going?" Anyway, John, is there a scenario though that they let a guy like Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson dictate what they want offensively? Like, could that be the selling point? I mean, look, Drew didn't do that, but Sean let him run a lot of the same things. You listen to what they talk about in 2006, that Drew ran a lot of the things that he wanted to do, but Sean just called it. Do you think that there's a scenario, though, maybe not a Rodgers, but a Russ, that they could sell that to?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I really do. Again, you want to be a partnership, right, between your OC and the quarterback, right? But it's not always that, because I think as a quarterback, you know what you're seeing and stuff, and I think it's got to be a collective, like, hive mind, if you will. But I think that could be a selling point. Is, look, hey, we'll give you power over some of these calls. Obviously, check out of this, and all these different things. But I think that could be something that they look at. Whether it remains to be seen. Is that a super selling point? Because I think Rodgers does a lot of that, by
Already.
himself, but not always, right? Because
All
there's
right.
times where you look at him, it's like, that's not the play I wanted or anything like that. So I think that could help, in the grand scheme of things. But, you know, whoever they get at offensive coordinator, again, you look at it. I like the fact that it's going to be a fresh perspective. It's going to be brand new. So you get a quarterback that's a veteran that's going to know what he likes and these types of tendencies. I think it works well for both parties involved.
Since we're talking offense, we obviously got to talk about AK. Look, John, I've made it known, and I don't want you to say this, but there's a lot of questions surrounding it, even from the police report, and everybody knows my past and what I do from the legal perspective, and there's a lot of questions from that report. John, Roger Goodell came out and said that he knew about the Alvin Kamara situation and still let him play in the Pro Bowl, which is so wild to me. And nothing happens to Roger Goodell for allowing him to play in that without doing anything. I mean, John, what's the scenario and situation that we're looking at here? Because I don't really know what to make of any of this, but what are you hearing, and maybe just even opinion? What do you think's going on around this?
Yeah, look, I mean, the hearing's not until March 8th, right? So the thing
Mhm.
is, it's not a good look either way, because I mean, the thing is, you're a high profile athlete. You shouldn't be in this situation in the first place, right?
I
And
agree.
again, I think the tendency is, you hear something bad, you assume the worst, and you rush to judgment. I think both parties, both sides, there's obviously something in the middle where the truth is, right? And so we haven't
Mhm.
seen the video. now there's conflicting stories about the video. This, and again, I'm not saying they'll sweep this under the rug. In the best case scenario, and I'm no legal advisor or anything like that, right? But if they can settle this, if this guy drops the charges and then they settle outside for whatever that is, that might be the ideal route. But, again, you got to surround yourself with better people. You can't be in a situation like this because you saw what happened to Henry Ruggs. One bad decision, his career is over,
Right.
and this, I mean, he didn't kill anybody, thank God. But at the same time, a battery charge in Las Vegas, that's not a like a little thing that you deal with. So
That's
I'm
right.
trying to, one of the things that I'm reserved judgment because I want to see all the facts. And of course, you knew the law group that came in, he said what he said on record, according to the police. So maybe you should have waited around for an attorney before you kind of said some of that type of stuff too. But at the same time, I think we know AK, and just being around him and knowing he's not that type of guy that's the aggressor. I would say that, um, and again, not saying that he's innocent or anything, and I'm not saying he's guilty, but at the same time, we want to see what happens on the video. If we ever get the leak of that, I'm sure TMZ will probably push it out at some point.
Oh,
right?
they're gonna find it, John.
They're foaming at the mouth to try to get it right.
Absolutely.
And so
if they can get people protesting at Area 51 to release the aliens, they can get an Alvin Kamara. They can get an Alvin Kamara video. That's for sure.
But and then the thing is, I'll go back to DA's. I was going to say, going back to DA's press conference. I mean, he could have not answered or talked to anything, but I think he's in the same thing. We're in the fact finding stage. We're trying to figure out what's going on. Everybody's aware of it. We just got to see how this plays out. And again, a long time between now and March 8th. I'm not going to sit here and tell you, hey, is this going to be a situation where he gets suspended? We don't know. I mean, it's kind of a weird look for the NFL to say, hey, we knew about this incident, but we're going to let you play in the Pro Bowl. That's a bad look. I mean, not that you can take this guy out of the roster because it raises questions, but again, I mean, you look at some of the things. I think there was a picture floating around one of his knuckles. I mean, one of his knuckles was kind of a little swollen. And again, I'm not trying to jump to conclusions, so maybe there is some consistency there for some of this. I don't know. Maybe it was one of his buddies. We got to wait and see what happens. But there is big concern, and the Saints could be looking for another running back. They were already going to need another one because,
Correct.
Behind Mark Ingram, it's Alvin Kamara. Tony Jones Jr. was really just not as good as we thought he would be heading into this season. So, and then Dwayne Washington's a free agent. So you got to get some talent there. And, it'll be a sore spot. But look what happened to Marshawn Lattimore last year. Everything blew out of proportion, facing a felony for the gun charge. That just went away, right? He didn't face league discipline. I'm not saying something shady wasn't done or anything like that, but at the same time, let's just see how this thing plays out, and then we'll figure out where it go from there.
And it does give you some confidence too that that the Saints didn't cut him, and that the league let him play. I mean, the league had to know something. And look, Roger Goodell, he's privileged to information and things that we're not privileged to. I would assume that he's already seen the video, regardless of what his later statements will be. I just saw the video today. John, that's a lie. I mean, let's call it what it is. And look, you don't have to say this, but I will. Not even talking to his assistant who threw the first punch and the shove with her back turned, right? Like that's a whole nother question in and of itself. A woman standing behind and a man behind her with her back turned, and then she throws a punch. That's not, there's a lot of questions that need to go on there. But nevertheless, one last question. John Hendrix is our guest. You can find him over at Sports Illustrated. He's going to tell you where you can get to all of his stuff. John, I'm not going to lie. You probably already know this, but every time you tweet something, I'm like, retweet. The people need to know. So if I'm doing it, guys, y'all need to do it as well. Dennis Allen had the press conference. We hadn't talked about it much right now. Is there something that stood out in his press conference to you that was like, oh, okay, well, I learned from being with the Raiders? Is there something that stood out to you when you were talking to him?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things. I mean, he handled himself extremely well. And, I think a couple things. He knows he's living in Sean Payton's shadow, and he said he's okay with that. And again, he's just trying to be the best version of himself. And so, I'll say that I saw Amy Trask talk about it on CBS Sports Radio, talking about all these different things about, the troubles in the past with the Raiders. Here's what I would tell you about this. Dennis Allen left the Saints after 2010. He goes to be the Broncos coordinator for a year and gets promoted to be a head coach at the Raiders. And he's 39 years old, right? And so It's kind of weird because if you're a DC for 1 year and then the Broncos weren't setting the world on fire, right? And so even in that year, if you're the same person you were 10 years ago, then I question what you do in life, because I'm not the same person I was when I was 27 that I am at 37. So he's learned a lot. And I think what he said, he's got the good talking points. He spoke very well spoken, talking about the city and wanting to mirror it. And he's one of those coaches where, again, hold yourself accountable. He's going to make sure that, and he even praised the players, right? And so I think it's his professionalism. You see what he brings to the table. And I think one of the things he said to Mickey that obviously rang through in the conference, he's like, I'm interviewing now, but I've really been interviewing 12 of the past 16 years. I've been in New Orleans. So this is a guy who understands what they have, what the culture is, what the standard is. And I think this is the reason why they chose him, right? Because you look at the roster they had, and I keep going back to this because everything I was told and heard from this, that was a key factor in it, is somebody that can come in with this roster, keep the culture, and somebody who had experience. Those are the two bucket list items that the Saints had, right? And so there's only a couple that fit that bill, right? Doug Peterson was one that, he had coaching experience. So did Brian Flores, but who knew the culture better than Dennis Allen? It would be Dennis Allen, right? And so that was a key decision-making process thing for them. And so, again, I just feel like he handled himself extremely well. I know he's extremely excited about this opportunity. And look, I am too, because, you look back, Drew retires. That's one thing to be excited about, and because you just don't know what to expect. Now Sean hangs it up or steps down. I expect him to be in TV soon, right? And we both expect him to be in TV. And I tell you what, once he gets into TV, if I'm making $18 million a year, I don't think I'm coming back for a coaching job that's 10, and working tirelessly from 5 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night and just sleeping on a cot. I just don't see that happening.
You're going to have to pay the man $20 million. You're going to have to John Gruden him, right? Like, you're going to have to John Gruden him to get him out of there. I don't see anybody doing it, but you never say never, John. You never say never. John J. Hendrix, follow him on Twitter at John J. Hendrix, senior lead writer reporter for at the Saints News and for SI Now. Does a Believe Saints podcast. Listen to it as much as I can, which is pretty much every time y'all do a podcast. John, tell them everywhere. I know I just mentioned it, but everything that you're working on, everything they're doing. If I miss anything, tell them where they can find all your work and everything.
Yeah, definitely. Just check us out at saints.media is the best way to go, but si.com/NFL/Saints. Check me out on Twitter at John J. Hendrix. It's Hendrix, just like Jimmy, as I always throw out. And, again, some people catch that reference, but no relation to it. Again, I wish, just because I don't know what I'd be doing if I was in that type of money. You know what I mean? So, and then definitely Believe in Saints. I do a podcast with Terrence Copper. Played 10 years in the NFL. He is fantastic. And so we just released an episode today. Just give it a download, check it out. And if you got feedback for us, let us know. But Terrence brings some invaluable things to the table as a former wide receiver in the league, especially under Peyton, just some of the things that he says. And we do extremely well together. So I encourage you to go check it out.
I agree with that. Y'all have a very
shameless
good
plugs.
Hey, man, you got to do it, man. If I ask you a question, you gotta plug it away, man. Hey, thank you so much, brother. Y'all have a good night. Y'all have a good weekend. Super Bowl week. I'm going to be wearing a Joe Burrow Bengals jersey. Look, I'm a Saints fan, but I got to root for Joe, my brother.
Oh, I got to root for Joe too. Can't fathom the thought of the Rams hoisting a Super Bowl trophy. And here's the way, if you're a Saints fan, either way, you're hosting a Super Bowl team next year in the Superdome.
Right.
I hope it's not the Rams, because I think I'll puke.
Me too. Hey, you've been fantastic as always. As Blaine Smith says, great guest. You and Memphis are his favorite. And thank you again, man. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, guys.